More and more of Malcolm Turnbull's book is popping out there into the media through a promotional deal with the 9 media newspapers, surprise, surprise, and with the more interesting stories seemingly obtained by hard-working journalists at the Australian. Turnbull slams the disloyalty of his colleagues for bringing him down. These would be the same colleagues he had previously pressured into being disloyal to Tony Abbott to install him. Yes, apparently it was political destiny and the saviour of the nation when Turnbull used Abbott's string of news poll losses to bring him down in 2015. But it was an abomination and a tragedy for the nation when Turnbull, after an even longer run of news poll losses, was brought down in similar fashion. Turnbull unloads on his colleagues and unloads on the media as well. Apparently News Corp, 2GB and Sky News were against him. Never mind he seized the job under their reporting and they backed him at the 2016 election. Sure, as you well know, some journalists and hosts here and at 2GB thought that Turnbull was deplorable. But there was no campaign, I ought to know. Apart from being a former Chief of Staff to Malcolm Turnbull, I wrote virtually all of the Australian's political editorials for this entire period. And when it comes to media treatment, why does Turnbull never mention the barracking from Fairfax, most of the press gallery, the vast resources of the ABC, SBS and the leftist website The Guardian Australia that he helped to found and whose political reporters he apparently handpicked? Has any contemporary political leader had so much fawning coverage from the media? Turnbull's trouble was that he was more interested in winning over those journalists than the voters. It was a fundamental flaw. If the electorate was the press gallery in Canberra, Turnbull would have been Prime Minister for life. Turnbull also continues to style himself as a martyr on climate change. He killed his leadership twice on this nonsense of trying to pass a climate policy in cahoots with Labor. I find it hard to comprehend the futility of destroying your political career twice on a climate policy, pretending you can save the planet when your party is supposed to support economic development and your country contributes only 1.3% and reducing of global emissions. I haven't read the book. I've seen bits and pieces. Turnbull downplays Morrison's election win and suggests he would have done the same. But Turnbull and Morrison each led the coalition in one election, and Abbott did so twice. And across those 4 elections, Abbott and Morrison both won seats from Labor. Turnbull only lost them. That's just the hard facts. Turnbull's most spectacular disaster when I worked for him back in opposition was the infamous Godwin-Gretsch affair. And on this, Turnbull honestly reveals his personal handling of the leaking and accepts his own culpability. It was the start of a dark period for him, and he goes on to write about how after he left the leadership and announced his retirement from politics, he struggled with depression and dark thoughts. This resonates with me. I spoke to Turnbull a number of times during this period, and I was one of those who encouraged him to rescind his resignation and stay in Parliament. I remember telling him he'd definitely end up a senior cabinet minister on the leadership. Who would ever know? For all the dramas, for all the ugly disloyalty that elevated Turnbull into the prime ministership and then, of course, saw him turfed out, he did get there. And he doesn't wear the dysfunction on his own. Political chaos has many players. And while his legacy is limited, you could mention same-sex marriage, a long-term tax cut plan, and I would throw in the US refugee deal too. Turnbull, like Abbott, will go to his grave frustrated by a prime ministership insufficiently fulfilled and cut off, like many careers, against his will. But if you want to bolster or preserve your political legacy, it's best not to publish a book lashing out at your colleagues, blaming everyone else and declaring you were the victim of some grand media conspiracy rather than your own failings. And with the Morrison government, the media and the whole country so consumed now by a real and present crisis for our health, our economy and our society, Turnbull's so-called bigger picture looks like small beer indeed.